Good afternoon, everyone who is watching online right now, joining us live, and also good afternoon to you if you are joining us later at a time of your convenience. I certainly hope that people are taking the opportunity of that. So in case you don't know, I'm Alice Bunn, I'm CEO here at the institution, and I have a very, very fine lineup for you today. I will leave my guests to introduce themselves in due course, but hopefully you're here expecting a session on strategy. We've had a really, really strong year in the publication of that high-level strategy earlier this year, but we're really, really hoping to be working more closely with all of you volunteers who do such a lot for the institution and are such a fundamental element of making this strategy really work. So thank you again for all your time. Hopefully you will have also been able to join some of the sessions earlier this week. So we're Wednesday afternoon, we're halfway through. Well done you for still hanging on in there. So without further ado, let's get into the meat of it. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our Deputy President, Giles Hartill.
Well, hello everyone. My name's Giles Hartill, Deputy President, and I'm currently the Chair of the Strategy Committee. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of an introduction around the work we've been doing on developing our institution's strategy, and that hopefully then will frame the context of the further discussion. So just to start off, a little bit of the basics around, where we are in the strategy development process. We have been doing a lot of strategic analysis over the last year or two, both looking at internal and external factors, etc. And we've got to the position where we've developed a high-level strategy, and we're in the phase now of really widely engaging with the content of that high-level strategy and starting to work the detail below into that, with the aim of getting to the point in May next year of then rolling out the strategy fully across the institution. So on the figure you can see here, I would say we're in that sort of middle space between developing the strategy and then moving into implementation next year. So that's just to give you a bit of a context around where we are at the moment. Now, I wanted to just focus on this slide for a minute, because the model that we put in place in terms of how we're developing this work and how we're organising it with the institution is probably something really important for you to know how we're operating it. We set the strategy committee up as what we called a hub and spoke model, at the beginning of this, going back a couple of years ago, and hopefully this describes that to you in a very simple, straightforward manner. The strategy committee is accountable to the trustee board, who are accountable for the strategy of the institution. So the strategy committee is developing that for the trustee board, but we're obviously engaging widely as part of this. So key links to council, and with Martin here, who we'll come to in a minute, there's been a huge amount of work engaging with council on this, a huge amount of work with the staff of the institution. Yes, we've been looking at external analysis, but then also really engaging with the boards and committees within the volunteer network, which is a lot of you on the call will be members of panels or committees, etc. And hopefully some of you already have seen some of this output, and this is just a chance to reaffirm some of that going forwards. Now, quite simply, the top level strategy, our main mission, talks about improving the world through engineering. Now, that phrase will be familiar to hopefully everyone on the call. It's been something that we've had for a while, but the main important thing that we've then come up with is, okay, so a lot of people have said to us, well, how do we do this? How do we improve the world through engineering? And quite simply, we boiled it down to two things. It's about making sure that we develop, support, and represent all of our members to essentially make sure that they're the best engineers they can be, when they're going out and facing the challenges of the world in their daily lives, whether that be through academic research or business or whatever it is. And then the second part of it is about the impact that we have on society in terms of influencing the way that the planet moves forward into the future to face those global challenges. And that's influence to anyone, but particularly things like governments and industries, etc., where you're going to get the most impact. So we're really honing in on those two things and then building the strategy around that, because we feel through those two strategic goals, you get to improving the world through engineering. And that's the important link that we try to create. Now, just one final slide where we're talking about the things that help us achieve that. There are a number of strategic enablers here. A lot of the ones on the left-hand side in the sort of green and yellow are about the sorts of standard things you'd expect from almost any organisation, right? So whether it be best practice, governance and leadership, being financially resilient, etc., diverse and inclusive culture. Those are the sorts of things that all organisations like you'd expect to have. But particularly on the right-hand side, some of the things we picked up, and especially the one that's in the sort of red dotted circle, our digital service offering is absolutely crucial. And I think already this week there's been a session on the digital strategy going forwards. So hopefully if you haven't seen that, you get an opportunity to see that as well. But clearly then the other 2 points here about making sure that we are being genuinely international and we're partnering internationally with other like-minded organisations to increase our impact is really key going forwards. And then the final thing, which is probably the most relevant to this whole conference, is making sure that we've got well-supported staff and volunteers working in close partnership together, because we feel that that is how we one of the main things and main ways that we can be successful as an organisation. So that's just a very brief introduction to the high-level principles of the strategy. The main purpose of this session is to get into a bit of a discussion, but you will get the slide deck, which includes more content available to you after this session as well.
Super, thank you, Giles. And I was so pleased that you emphasised that one team nature of the delivery of the strategy at the end. Staff and volunteers really working closely, hand in hand, in partnership, and you see that often in the strategic enablers. I also think the simplicity of organising ourselves around those two objectives is really elegant and will be quite powerful actually. Super. So I now have the great pleasure of introducing our current president, Phil Peel, who's going to give a perspective from the Trustee Board. Over to you, Phil.
Great, thanks very much, Alice. So maybe just to introduce myself, my name is Phil Peel. I'm the current president, as Alice has just mentioned. I will be until May of next year when Giles will take over from me. I'm the 137th president of the institution and the first one that's actually resident outside of the UK, having had to fly in from Switzerland this morning, which I'm doing quite a lot recently, but that's working okay. But it gives me a different perspective, I think, in terms of the operations. And I'm glad that Giles mentioned the global aspects of strategy, and I think that is an important area that we need to focus on as well. So firstly, I just wanted to start off by saying that I think it's really great that we're all here today, and I'm excited that we're communicating again with the volunteers. And we haven't done it in this format for a long time. I know there's an awful lot of effort that's been put into actually get this week sorted out. So I would really encourage you to take the opportunity to join as many sessions as you can, make the most of it. And don't forget, we're here to support you in your volunteer journey. So, do reach out to us if you feel you need, support after these sessions in any way to help you on that journey. So just coming back to the point that Alice mentioned about where does the Trustee Board sit in regard to strategy? Well, I think we've realised for quite a few years ago that maybe our strategic view and direction wasn't maybe as up to date as it could be, and I think it's really important for us as an institution that we fulfil our charitable objectives. That's why we're here as a charity. And we need to look and see how we set our strategy in relation to that and how we can be most effective in terms of implementing it. So we want to improve the world through engineering, and that can mean many things to many people. So we've needed to discuss proposals, actively work on defining a clear roadmap forward. And I think that's the activity that has really been picked up and run with in a really effective manner by the Stratcom, so the strategy committee. So that was initially launched, I think, in early 2021, chaired previously by the past president, Peter Flynn, and Giles has been in the chair when Peter sort of stepped down to take over the presidency for last year. So I think that's really been working very actively to formulate a future approach that we should have with regard to strategy. I just wanted to emphasize where the trustee board sort of fits in on all that, and quote an aspect of the charity governance code for large charities that outlines that organizational purpose is the overarching principle that ensures trustee boards are clear about their organization's aims and ensures that they are being delivered effectively and sustainably. And the code states that a trustee board's core governance roles are to focus on strategy as well as performance and assurance. So the trustee board has been and remains fully supportive of the Stratcom approach that's being adopted here. And we've received regular inputs from Stratcom as it's progressed through the strategy development. So I think it's important as trustees that who are responsible for the leadership of the institution, that they set the agenda on a strategy and ensure it's moving in the right direction. So in my year as president, I want to see us embed the strategy in our business plan and directives. And then as Giles takes over the presidency next May, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us as an institution to drive that strategy further forward and firmly establish it for the future of the institution. So Alice, if I can pass back to you.
Thank you, Bill. And finally, and this is a very elegant conclusion to these set introductions, because I hope already you've been picking up that really strong sense of partnership working, be that across staff and volunteers, be that internationally, or be that with council. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Alice. And yes, hello, everyone. So I've been chairing council now for about 3.5 years. And over that time, we've been making really considerable strides to make council operate better and achieve more, support the institution better and work better with all parts of it. For those of you not familiar, council has almost 80 members. Of those, we have 49 who are the chairs of the major constituents within the institution. That's the regions, the international regions, the divisions and the groups. We also balance that with 28 independent members elected in each year. And so we have a tremendous asset here, wonderful, talented people to help and work on things. We've established two permanent working groups. And one of those is a strategy group, which we sort of kicked off as a forum before Stratcom was created, to give us space for the members of council to start exercising in the arena of strategy thinking, and particularly with regard to strategic topics for the institution. So we laid some groundwork there. Certainly over the last year, while Stratcom has been very productive and come towards the point it is now, we've been happily agreeing on very much of what is of what's been coming out of that, but perhaps coming at it from different directions, which I think adds enormously to the strength of what is there. The thing which is most important to me is we have now some very simple statements. We have two simple statements of objectives of how we're going to move forward in the future, and they are focused on developing our members to be the best they can and working through our members to give the best impact on society. And we've also identified this set of enablers, the things that are going to help to make that happen. Now, that is incredibly helpful as a tool for us all to say, how do we fit in with this? How do we use those things? It gives the language to talk to each other about how we can interact and work with each other. So it's a very good starting point, and I'm very pleased that it's got to that point.
Very good. Thank you, Martin. And thank you to our viewers. We've already got our first question coming from Tony. So I'm going to pick up on that in leading the next round of questions, as it were. But do please come forward with questions, usual way, put them in the chat bar. It's a great opportunity to pick these fine minds sitting to the left and right of me. And I hope we can have a really rich discussion. So Giles, the question has come in saying, when will we see the expanded strategy slides that we can discuss them and the strategy? Now, I'm going to suggest at this point, we've got some options. We can freewheel and we can discuss, or perhaps the team can put some of the more expanded slides up as well to display as we go through the discussion. So Giles, I'm going to come to you, and maybe we can first talk about impact, because that is a new focus for the strategy, or at least a renewed focus for the strategy. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that means and what the next steps are going to look like.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, to deal with the slide pack and the information. So the slides that we've just showed briefly now are just part of a wider pack of information. So that will be made available, and there's a wider engagement brief being rolled out to all the boards and committees already throughout the course of this year, and it will be well into next year as well. And we see that as a continual piece of activity, essentially. So yeah, and a lot of this content will be published on the website, etc. So it'll be available to everyone. But at the moment, we're building up to getting people's feedback in order to then drive the final strategy that we're aiming to launch in May. That's the plan between now and May, essentially. So, and this is another one of those great opportunities. In terms of impact, Alice, you know, we've been quite clear all along that, as Martin just alluded to, I think in the past, maybe the volunteer network has perceived a lot of the impact work, the promotion and influencing activity of the institution has been very much been led by HQ, as it were, you know, here in Birdcage Walk. And whilst there's a really important aspect of that, in terms of the expertise of the people we employ around policy development, etc., and promotion of engineering, the point we're trying to get across in the strategy is around, we've got over 100,000 members worldwide. You know, if we were able to get even a little bit of those 100,000 members' time to help promote engineering in a meaningful way, in an organised way, that's a huge opportunity. And we really want to get that point across, that the impact we get is through our members, as Martin said. Like, it's not just about like staff writing policies and then getting like those published, or setting up breakfast sessions with MPs, etc., either in this country or equivalents in other countries. It's about making sure that we're using our members' expertise to do that, that we harness the power of, and you know, collective competence of our members to make sure that those things that we're talking about are actually the most credible things, because that's the value we provide as an institution. If you will, our unique selling point over other organisations. It's the fact that we've got this hugely competent membership that is expert in all these sorts of different fields that actually the world really needs help with. To getting the parts of the world accessible to our expertise is really the point about impact going forwards. And the final point I'd say is not just about us, it's about how we collaborate with others and making sure that we're using our influence in partnerships with other people to then widen that influence further, because then you start growing 100,000 people into 1 million people, etc. And that's really where we're aiming at.
Super. Thank you, Giles. I think in many respects, it's a wonderful problem to have, isn't it? We have 115,000 members, all of whom are hugely rich in skills and expertise. Our problem is now how to surface that and how to get access to all that skills and expertise in as robust and transparent way as we can to make sure that we are delivering maximum impact. But I like the way you finished on partnerships as well, because we're not going to be doing this in isolation. Martin, maybe you want to say a little bit more about partnerships.
Yes, absolutely. It's I think this is another area of huge opportunity, where we have to consider, given our objectives now, what are the things that we do best ourselves? What are our core activities? And what are those things which we absolutely want to take advantage of, but always other people will do it better than us? And are these partnerships which can work so well together? And just to give you an example of that, and I'm not going to pick on the institution, the IMechE, but if you take professional engineering institutions as a whole and look at their performance on YouTube for videos, and compare it with other YouTube channels which are covering the kind of topics which we would like to, you'd look at it and say, well, if you're doing this for the same purpose, the engineering institutions frankly shouldn't be doing it, because the number of hits they get doesn't even get close to what some are achieving. So maybe if that's what we're after, maybe that's a partnership where you get in touch with somebody who can get millions of hits within weeks of a topic that we can get hundreds of hits within a year or so. It's not just us. This goes across the engineering institutions. But it is a matter of making a decision about what do we want to achieve, how do we want to achieve it, and then who does it best. And I think that's where treating partners as assets and being quite innovative about who these partners might be, making sure it's also localized, international again. We can't keep thinking of the institution from a UK or heaven forbid London-centric point of view. We have to look globally and act locally in these areas.
Absolutely, and I think that point around partnerships applies equally to our operations as it does to our impact. So before this session, I was at a meeting with ASHRAE, who many of you will know, thinking about ways in which we could work together more closely around one of our key policy priorities. Well, actually two, because it covers net zero as well as healthcare and infectious disease control. But thinking how we can work together to sort of mutually amplify our message. And Phil, you included in your introduction that you are proudly the first international president. You must have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I think we need to recognise that that quite a sizable proportion of our membership sits outside of the UK, and you know, I don't want to play down the importance of us having a voice here in the UK, because I think it is really important. But I think we need to think wider than that. We need to set our targets to the point that we feel that we've got a global voice, and I think we do. I think in certain areas we are active, we are being heard around the globe. But I think we can always build on that. We can always take the opportunities to think a little bit bigger, and thinking how we could collaborate with other organisations. And Alice, you're aware that we had a session recently with the VDI who were based in Germany, and they have a large proportion of members based out of the German engineers. The system there is a little bit different. If they want to practice in Germany, they have to be a registered engineer, and that encourages them to join the member organisation VDI. But VDI is really keen to build collaboration with us to see how they can benefit from having sort of opportunities to work with somebody who sits outside of Germany. And I think we'll benefit from actually working with them as well. Because when you work with an organisation that sits outside of the UK, you see things differently. You see how things work in the local environment. And I've seen it to a certain extent working in Switzerland as well. And there, Swiss Engineering is the local organisation. It's not really an organisation set up in the same way as we are. It doesn't have volunteers. People just join it so to be informed about engineering within Switzerland. But nevertheless, you know, I think the Swiss engineers feel an obligation to join it. And I think we as an organisation have got so much more to offer globally in terms of what we can provide. You know, we put on events. We have a policy that we really want to push quite strongly around the world. And I think we need to look for more opportunities to be able to do that.
Well said, Phil. And I think, you know, having worked in government myself, sometimes a bit of international peer pressure can be quite helpful.
Yes.
You know, ministers feeling a bit of FOMO we can use that in a powerful way. Giles, I'm going to come back to you to talk us through a little bit more about what the next few months are going to look like. So you alluded to it in terms of building out the impact strategy. We've got to where we are now. What do the next few months look like for you? And how can we encourage people around this table, around this virtual table, to get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. So the bulk of the work at the moment is focused around engagement, as well as developing the lower level detail of the strategy objectives. So we set up 3 working groups to focus on the 2 key strategic goals, so membership development and impact. So we have working groups working the detail of those. And we also have a 3rd working group focusing on digital, because we see that as the most important strategic enabler, particularly if we're going to be a genuinely international organisation like Phil was just talking about. You know, we've been very clear that in this hybrid working world, you have to have, like, you know, the best available digital services to enable us to collaborate. So we've been putting that detail in place. We've been doing engagements. This is another example of that type of engagement. And the path forward between now and Christmas is to iron out the lower level strategic objectives, so that we're clear around the timeline of how we're going to implement those. So we want to be able to prioritize them. You know, we're going to be in a position where we've got a certain amount of resource, but we don't want to be thinking on an annual business planning basis. We want to be thinking 3, 5, 10 years ahead in time and planning out our activities over at least that time frame. I would really like to get to a 20-year view, ideally. We're not there yet, but that's the vision, to get that 20-year look ahead in terms of the activities and priorities we're going to span over that kind of timescale. So once we're back after Christmas, we're going to be looking at finalising the content of those lower-level strategic objectives, and formulating that into what I would call a publishable strategy, the sort of thing that we would be proud to put on, you know, the front page of our website. And we will build that through the spring, so that when it comes to May, I would like to be in a position that I can stand up and do my presidential address after taking over from Phil, to really roll out that strategy. And I would see next year, much in the same way that this year has been about celebrating 175 years of the institution, I would see very much next year being about rolling out the strategy across the institution, across the staff, across the volunteer network, and across obviously the wider membership, including external organisations. So that's really the plan for next year, Alice.
Fabulous. And Graham, you came in very timely with a question about when we will see those specifics. So I hope that's helped answer that particular question. But the other thing I would add is, please don't take away a message that, you know, the world's going to stand still for the institution until we have that fuller strategy published next year. Because of course, what we have now is a high-level strategy that sets a direction of travel. So we can already be making progress towards that. As of, for instance, we will be appointing a new director of engineering policy and impact. Certainly on the staff side, that's an area in the institution that's been rather underweighted over the last few years. So already we can pivot the way in which we organise ourselves towards a more effective delivery of the strategy. It must not be a strategy that sits on a shelf. Similarly, just this week, we had a very opportunistic opportunity to, how many opportunities have I had in this sentence? You get the gist. To host the MP Chris Skidmore, who was appointed by the Prime Minister actually to lead the Net Zero review for government. So we were able to host him, a roundtable event taking place tomorrow. Net zero is one of our policy priorities, and I think it's really helpful having that very public and visible commitment towards our priorities. Now, thank you, Graham. You've also put in a couple of other questions, which I'm going to dish out across our panel. The first one is, how do we solve the building issue? Now, Martin, you are on the new headquarters working group, so I think you're eminently well placed to answer the question. Over to you.
Yes. Building, tricky. We have got, on behalf of the members, the institution, a very strong team who are agonising over this at the moment and busy gathering the most up-to-date information about to inform it over condition, market valuations that might inform it, and other things like this. Those are taking some time, therefore it has been a bit quieter than may have been desirable, but it's important not to get people too worked up before there is real information to work on. The thing with the building is, you know, when you have assets sort of fall into two categories. Either they're a commodity or they're something very special and unique. If it's just a commodity, you absolutely look at it from a utility point of view. And do I need it? How am I going to need it? What am I going to do with it? And you come up with some kind of a rational decision for it. If, however, it's something which is very, very unique, particularly if you own it yourself, you tend to say, what opportunity does this give me, since I actually already have it and it has these unique characteristics? And I think this is what makes the decision about the building very difficult and something that we are looking at. But we are very much into the strategic, if you like, investment decision of the building. We are not anywhere close to looking at design issues. Now, there's been tremendous amount of work, and RESG did tremendous amount of work on what would be the optimal design for this building, for our needs, that would make something happen. That is good work that is on the shelf waiting. We've taken a step back from that, and particularly because there are so many turbulent events going on around us. You could almost go back, I don't know, 10 or 15 years and look at a set of thinking and proposals for this building, which you say, well, why didn't they do it then? Or why don't we do what was decided then? Well, the problem is times have changed. It didn't happen then because we also got tempted away from making a decision because other things like mergers, which come up on a routine cycle, distracting us. And is that going to affect us or what have you? So it's a very, very difficult thing. We fully intend, once we get these reports in, and there is substantial, current, up-to-date information, and to go along with the logic of the thinking that backs it up, to then go out and engage. And in fact, my plea to all the volunteers at the moment is to make sure through your own part of the organisation that your needs to engage have come up. We can certainly throw it out, but if people don't come back and say, in particular, we would like to be involved and have a say in this aspect or that aspect, then that will help and make sure we don't sort of miss each other en route.
Yeah, a real plea for engagement there. Well said, Martin. Giles, I wonder if you want to come in on this point as well, though, because it's been a bit chicken and egg, hasn't it? It was a bit, well, you can't do a strategy because you don't know what the build, or you can't do the building because you don't know what the strategy is. And I think our thinking has moved on in these last few months. Do you want to offer some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it really has. I mean, from the beginning, we've been really clear that, you know, we're developing this high-level strategy for the institution which sets our direction in the future. And one of the things I keep saying to people, because they ask all the time, is they say, well, you know, yeah, when's the strategy going to be published? Because then that's going to help us make a decision on the building. And the one thing I keep saying to people is, like, a strategy for the institution, we've set a strategic enabler that we need effective systems and processes and facilities. So it's an enabler having a building space to achieve our objectives. No one in their right mind would set a strategic objective to own a building in one birdcage walk. But as Martin said, we have the assets. So it's about how we use that asset in the best way for the charity. And the strategic analysis that's going on in the HQ working group that both Martin and I are part of is really about making sure that we're doing that strategic analysis in a fair and transparent way. As Martin said, we're getting the latest information around the building surveys and the condition reports, etc., and valuations and all of that good latest information. But then it's about applying a standard fair method of assessment. And, you know, the financial case, as an example, is just one part of that. Obviously, it needs to be financially viable, whatever we do with the building, but there are a number of other assessment criteria, and particularly strategic fit being one of them, about how do we achieve our ambition in the future. And quite simply, as far as I look at it, and, you know, we're not anywhere near making a decision at this stage because we haven't completed that analysis yet, but the outcome of the working group will be a recommendation of a way forward. Like, you know, we've been quite clear about that, having done that analysis. And the strategic fit in terms of the building is really important, because whatever we do with the building, whether we keep the building or whether we move away from the building, I've always been quite clear that that has a direct impact on our ability to implement the strategy going forward, because it will affect the amount of resource we have, whether it be financial or otherwise. So it's the pace at which we can influence and deliver the strategy that the building decision is dependent on. But the strategy itself doesn't drive the decision like in isolation, and I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, I'm going to channel Sean for a moment, because I think he summed this very neatly at a recent meeting, saying strategy is direction, finance is speed. I think that's quite a nice summary of it. And we've got one final question from Graham here. So Phil, you're not off the hook. You'll be delighted to hear. Graham would like to know, in the context of strategy, where the PEP should fit in.
Well, clearly we have as an organisation a number of trading subsidiaries and being managed through the PEP organisation. I think those were set up to allow us to generate some revenue to actually feed into funding of the Learning Society activities. I think we have to be very honest and say that it's perhaps not been as successful as we would have hoped it could have been. But I think there is still a role for trading subsidiaries within the organisation moving forward, but maybe with a stronger focus in terms of the direction we want to go with them. We will need to actually supplement our revenue streams. It's all about having not a complete reliance on the membership stream, but having other areas where we have the ability to generate cash to feed into our organisational requirements, and I think I see that probably as a potential strategy moving forward. So I think we are probably likely in some form to have PEP going forward, but it may not look exactly the same way as it does at the moment.
Super, thank you, Phil. We're going to come back again, so we've got more questions, this time from Tony, saying he's understood about the development of the strategy going forward, but is left with the impression that there's been very little engagement with members. And it occurs to me we haven't really talked very much about that membership subgroup, about the impact subgroup, and you did mention about the IT subgroup. So I wonder if we can say a little bit more about either of those. I'm kind of looking at Giles, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But by all means, if others want to pitch in, then please do.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we published the interim strategy, as we called it, back in May, we've been on this journey to get to what I would call the direct reporting boards and committees to the Trustee Board. So we've just about completed that phase in terms of engagement, and we've been looking at and analysing the feedback from those volunteer groups. And like I said, the path now for going forwards is to then roll out and expand the engagement across the entire volunteer network. Now, as I said earlier, that's really a job between now throughout the whole of next year in my mind. And the point I wanted to make that maybe I didn't make earlier is that in the build up to publishing the strategy in May, you might say, well, how does that work if you're going to keep doing engagement beyond that? The point I wanted to get across is this is a never ending thing. Yes, we're going to publish something in May, and that will be a line in the sands. But the strategy, if you're an organisation that really takes that seriously, you're constantly evolving your strategy. So all of the feedback we get will be a constant assessment process, because as the strategy committee moves into implementation, that doesn't mean you, as Alice said earlier, you park the strategy and that's shelfware. The strategy is a live, living thing, and we will constantly update and evolve that as we continue to do more strategic analysis, because obviously your internal factors could change, your external factors could change. So you've got to stay on top of it. And the final thing that we'll be doing, as well as that engagement, is developing our ability to monitor our performance against the strategy. It's really important that we don't just derive a business plan from the strategy and go deliver it. We have to make sure that we've got proper KPIs in place that are monitoring the right things for our organisation, so that we know how well we're doing against the strategy year on year. And we want to be in a position where effectively we've got a 3-year rolling programme that we're constantly churning. So every third year, you'd probably see a bit of a major uplift in the strategy, or a major review of it at least, with an annual dip check along the way. And that's the method by which we want this to stay live. So, you know, the engagement we're doing now, the engagement we're doing next year, it'll be a constant thing, basically.
No, thanks, Giles. And I'm minded of your introductory remarks, Martin, where you said, and council have been working here too, in fact, even predating the strategy committee, but perhaps coming at it from a slightly different angle, a bit more bottom up rather than top down, which might give some reassurance on the amount of engagement and the amount of granularity that has been in the analysis of what we do, or what we will propose to do, versus those two key objectives.
Yeah, I think we've lost the focus here. I'm not sure whether that improves the way I look on camera or not. But anyway, apologies to people who are watching. Perhaps I just clarify that council is an independent body, or well, let's say semi-independent body. It thinks independently on behalf of the members. So you know, we're all sitting around the table here, and we're absolutely working here in partnership. But my role is not, and council's role is not to be the cheerleader for what other parts of the organisation are doing. We're here to work with them, to support them in a supportive way. Sometimes we might do, but not to compromise our being able to assist. So hopefully what council is doing is looking a little bit further and a little bit outside, and exploring various things which those who are actually in the driving seat can't actually allow themselves with time necessarily to go down these rabbit holes. But council can. You know, we can go and have a little look and poke around and see what we think's in there. And I think that's a real advantage. But and we certainly have been doing that. But I'd also like to say how sort of thinking out of the box on strategy, and how we get to people to include them. We've gone through a period in the last few years of dramatic, actually it's been more behavioural change in how we're using technology, because actually nearly all of this was here before COVID started, and we were sort of forced to start using it. And now we're doing it, we find all sorts of advantages and the ability to reach out. But of course, it takes time to catch up with those opportunities and break away from patterns of behaviour that we had before, which were based on the fact that you couldn't do it. Well, now we can do it. And we absolutely have to start looking at how our community is broken up by geography and into numbers for an organisation that has grown enormously over, well, certainly the last 100 years. What you might do with a PEI with under 10,000 members is completely different to what you might need to do and how you organise yourself when you've got 120,000 members. And the way you do it when you do have technology to enable it and allow us to meet like this, or you have to bring everybody into one place to be in there in person, that's completely different as well. So it could be that we're slightly on the back foot, but it isn't for the fact that we're not looking forward and trying to do our best. I'd like to see all of the local communities, whether it's regions, divisions, groups, wherever you are, engaging with these topics. When it comes to strategy, something I learned a long time ago was that you need to build a strategy machine. This is something which is constantly running, that is constantly monitoring those things which impact you and will help you to make a strategic decision. So that while that machine is working, at any point in time, and maybe you do it just once a year, maybe if an opportunity came up, you just put your question into the machine and actually you get a pretty close answer coming out of it. If, on the other hand, you do this amazing piece of work over a period of a year or 2 years, and then you put it on a shelf, work it, and then come back in 2 years and say, I think we should start all over again. This is not a good way to go ahead, right? So what clearly has been happening with all this effort is we're building a strategy machine. And what you're seeing is the first outputs from the machine. There will be more, and they will be in greater granularity. And the other point is to say we talk about strategy as if it's a single entity, and certainly the topic of strategy is a single entity, but it's made up of lots of strategies. lots of individual strategies, which are the clever ways of achieving what that strategy is aiming to achieve.
Could I just add to that quickly?
Yeah, please do.
It's a really valid point. You put it really nicely, Martin, because yeah, the strategy machine is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to create. So this is a continual process. We haven't had that in the institution up till now, and we're starting to build that machine so that this is constant and it survives, because, as Phil said at the beginning, it's an expectation on us as a charity to have that in place. And so we've spent essentially the last 2 years building that capability, and we're still not there yet. The machine's not built fully, but I'd say at this stage it's sort of, probably 60 to 70% complete, and we've still got a way to go. But yeah, that absolutely has to be the case, forever going forwards. Whilst we are an organisation that exists doing the work we do, we have to have that machine in place, and what I call systemising the work of doing strategic development, to make sure that this is something that we permanently keep on top of.
But also, if I can mention Mr. Pareto, everyone's heard of Mr. Pareto, the 80-20 rule. We've probably achieved some 80%, but only involving 20% of the people. Now, in some way, that's efficient and good, but in some ways, we haven't even started. We have to get to the other 80%. And the 20%, if it's only 20% that we get from the other 80%, it's actually enormously healthy and important, because we have to have the entire institution taking ownership over what the institution does.
Can I just jump in on that point? I would
do.
just like to emphasise that. I think it's such a critical aspect to strategy. And my experience is that strategies work when you convince the organisation that it's the right direction to head in. And if you don't convince the organisation that it is, and generally strategies are not as anywhere near as effective as you would like them to be, and in some cases just fail completely. So I think it's really great to hear Giles and the work of Stratcom in engaging the operating boards to actually get that message out there, and for them to start thinking about how they can get involved and how they can start engaging their members and filter it down into the organisation, and so that everybody shares the same understanding of what we're trying to achieve here and owns the strategy. So when there's ownership of the strategy, then people will really feel that they want to get involved in it, they want to drive it. And when we get individual members driving the strategy individually, then it'll really work.
And it's also really important to keep the top level messaging as simple as possible. A couple of examples on that. For those of you who are familiar with British Airways and their strapline, it is to serve to fly. Two things. We know exactly what we're saying. Now, the detail, well, we could be having this conversation if we haven't been part of this. What does that mean and what have you? Yes, absolutely. The other example, I used to work for a company, Atkins, some of you know them, who had three things: plan, design, enable. Okay? Now, although that leaves an enormous amount that has to be explained and thought through, whatever, the value is that it is such a simple message. That's what we're here to do. And so there's going to be a balance between the simplicity of the messaging coming out of this strategic objectives. And it is simple. It's 2 objectives and 7 enablers. I got that right?
Yep.
Two objectives, 7 enablers. If we can all keep focusing on those, then there's plenty of opportunity to explore what that actually means, and what that actually means, where you are, what you're involved in, how you relate to other people. And that, of course, is what will take more time.
It's been really interesting as we've been doing the engagement, because exactly as you both just said, it's a communication challenge, first and foremost, and we're building a proper communications plan so that we're clear about all the things we're going to do, which is part of the strategy development process. But a lot of the feedback we've got, as you just say, Martin, is about the words and the meaning of the words and the interpretation of the words. And when we go through that and we explain it to people, they go, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that if it means that, then yeah, I like it," or actually, could you tweak it because that I read it differently. That they've been the conversations that we've been having over the last sort of year, and the nice thing about all of that is that it really helps people understand, and for us to understand how the message and the words come across. But also, actually, at the end of it, it's not driving massive change in the strategy. It's nuances around language, which is obviously so important, and we need to get that right. But it's not like people are sort of seeing it and going, oh, well, hang on a minute, we shouldn't be doing that. That's not what I was expecting. And I find that, like, quite comforting in some way. And the work that council's been able to do in support of it, that Martin described, has been really useful, because they do have the ability to be able to look at it through a different lens, or multiple different lenses. And again, when we've done that and we've looked at it in those different ways, and then come back to it, we've managed to align it. So again, that gives me comfort that we're heading in the right direction.
And it's interesting, isn't it? We've been I'm going to come to another question in the chat in a moment, but just before we move on, listening to everyone's contributions, we are essentially talking about how we work. You talked about the way in which we deliver. So we are essentially talking about our values, everyone, impact, innovation, integrity, and inclusion. And I think it's worth dwelling on that for a moment, because I think particularly if you look at the strategic enablers, a focus on culture comes through. Now, you can call it values, you can call it behaviours, you can talk about diversity and inclusion, but in effect, it's all a continuum, isn't it? If you get the values right and the behaviours right, you create inclusion. If you create inclusion, you create diversity. So that culture of how we operate, I think, comes through really strongly in the strategy. Two presidents to my right, or one president, one nearly president. Is that all right to refer to you as a nearly president?
Nearly presidents, okay.
I mean, maybe we should just reflect on that for a moment. How do you see the culture changing? How have you seen the culture changing already in the last few years? Both of you have been in for a long while, and what would you like to see in the future?
I'll jump in first. I do think there has been significant changes in the culture of the institution over the years, and I think because we've worked on it hard, and we've actually set it as one of our areas of focus. And I think, when you do that, then you reap the benefits. And I would really like us to continue to build on the excellent work that we've started. We've got the D&I strategy rollout. We've had the first tranche completed. The second tranche, I think, it's close to completion. And then the third tranche will come along very soon. And excellent work being done there for us to focus on diversity and inclusion, and the critical aspect that brings for the institution. I mean, we had the session, I think it was yesterday, sort of chaired by Zoe, and an excellent session where people were able to see what was being done, and see the benefits that we as an organisation will get from actually adopting the right approach to D&I. So I think yes, we've made tremendous inroads to move forward. I still think we've got some work to do. I think we will always have some work to do, but that's I think we're well on the way, and I'm really encouraged by the way that we as an institution have changed to adopt those new values and behaviours.
Yeah, I like to think about it. If you flip it on its head and you say, well, what if we're not diverse, and what if we're not inclusive? Well, I just wouldn't see how we would achieve the goals we've set ourselves in the strategy. Because, if we want to be international, if we want to have strong partnerships, if we want our members to have impact, they're not going to do that in isolation. Like, you're not going to do that in isolation. It's about working together and collaborating. And if you want to collaborate, you've got to be inclusive, right? It sort of, one thing follows on from the other, like you were saying, Alice. So for me, it's really about making sure that, we put effort into making sure that this changes the way that we work together and collaborate together, the staff, the members, the volunteers, etc. Because if you just leave it to osmosis for it to happen, all the best practice examples out there show that doesn't change it fast enough, and you don't get the performance gains that you really are looking for from an organisation. Now, if you look at that from a commercial sense or from a charitable sense, you know, it's not about the money, it's about the pace and the performance of the goals you're setting. And for us, you know, we've taken the decision that we want to put serious effort into this because we see it as such an important enabler to achieving the rest of what we do. And as Phil was talking about, you know, some of those interactive training sessions that some of you may have been on, we've certainly been on them, and you know, the feedback's been amazing. Just in terms of the fact that people have said this is the first time that I've been on a training course with, you know, staff and volunteers together. Just that simple thing has been quite stunning for a lot of people. I certainly felt that way, and that in itself is powerful. And that is what the kind of culture that we want to carry forwards into just normal everyday activity, essentially.
Yeah, well said. I mean, we will be so much more successful if we're operating with that one team mentality, I think. Martin, anything further from culture? You, otherwise I'm going to turn to you for the next question too.
I mean, I just draw on my background. You know, I used to do performance improvement, behavioural-based performance improvement in companies, and we would say that culture simply is the way things are done around here. And so turning it into the way things are done about here is what you have to focus on. I think it's two-pronged. One is the way you approach things and how you open up and invite and encourage and see the value in everyone, rather than being defensive and putting up barriers and classifying people or simply not thinking about them. And the other one is to say that actually if we focus on, as we've been talking about here, the strategy, and we all get behind going in a particular way, and we streamline ourselves so that we work efficiently and effectively together as a united team to go towards those goals. Well, funnily enough, that's the way we do things around here, right? And it all comes together, and that's really important.
Thank you. Yeah, I am going to come to that one. So, Graham, thank you. You've pointed out something in the chat which I think many of us were really disappointed about, actually, and that is the very low turnout that we had in the recent election results. And I'm just interested, you know, Martin, you've been around the buoy here a few times.
Yes.
How do you think having such a clearly articulated strategy, how will that impact? How can we use that to drive that so much needed participation and engagement in our election process?
Well, it's not going to happen overnight. This is, and I was going to say earlier that when we start having any conversation about strategy, we're talking about things today that are going to bear fruit a long time in the future. We've already spoken about the building, and when we talk about the building, yes, we can think about the building and full membership today, but frankly, we need to be talking about the building and the institution in the context of our children and our grandchildren, people who might actually, if we choose not to be here, never even remember that we ever were here. Right? So time frame is quite important, and when it comes to what impact we're going to have on the engagement of members, therefore whether they're going to be participating more actively in elections, whether they see more of the institution than simply providing them with their post-nominals. The danger is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you assume that all our members want is their letters and act that that's all they're going to get, then my fear is that actually is a death wish for the institution. And we've got to reverse that. We've got to make ourselves relevant enough that people are seeing more than that. And you mentioned, Graham, you know, about this particular thing. Why do people want to have their post-nominals, and why do they want to have their post-nominals from this institution? Well, that's because everything that we do, which may be not what they're immediately looking for, goes into the bank of our brand. It's what gives the prestige of the organisation. And it's that prestige which they're buying into when they become members just for the post-nominals. You can't separate the two things out. And if we do go forward successfully, if we pursue things which not only are directed at and through the members, but that increase dramatically the reputation and the standing of the institution, then our prophecy is that it's going to be successful. And that's the direction that we want to be going.
Phil, Giles, your reflections on the importance of strategy for engagement.
Yeah, in particular with regard to member engagement for elections or wider.
As a proxy for member
As a proxy for that,
generally, I would
yes.
say, yeah.
I think engagement of members. I think there's always going to be a proportion of our members who really just want it for the post-nominals. I think we just have to be honest and accept that that's probably the case. But those who actually genuinely do want to get involved and engage with us further, then, you know, are we communicating that in the most effective manner at the moment? I just put that down as a question. I'm not sure what the answer is, but do we need to think about sort of a changes to our communication strategy in terms of actually trying to engage members in a more effective way, to tell them really what's out there in regard to what they could do for us as an institution. I feel that we've got lots and lots of exercises running at the moment in lots of different areas, and maybe we need to be a little bit more joined up in terms of the, you know, getting a single message out there that we welcome people to volunteer in whichever area they wish to get involved in, and we shouldn't necessarily be too particular in terms of trying to focus on, you know, one area or another. So just a general level of trying to, almost like a recruitment drive, I suppose. So if, you know, so throw the fishing net out maybe a little wider than we have done previously, to just get that engagement level up to a higher status than it's maybe been before.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's very varied across the institution. You know, for instance, tomorrow I'm going to be joining one of the STEM ambassador workshops, and it always staggers me that we have 7,500.
Yeah, we have a tremendous engagement there.
Absolutely extraordinary. Yes. You know, they're really, really powerful impact towards you know, education. But as you say, there isn't that same level of engagement. And as Graham has rightly pointed out, the election process is one such area at the moment. Yes. But Giles, you look like you've got an idea for that. Yeah, well, silver bullet, come on.
The election results, in terms of turnout, you know, obviously that's one measure. Would we like it to be higher? Yes, we would. There's lots of things that you could do to try and improve that, and we are looking at those, about how we, for example, you know, make it easier to understand the candidates and what they stand for, etc. But even if we were best in class at doing that, I still don't think you'd see the gains like getting up to sort of, you know, what you'd call high levels of engagement, sort of 80% plus. Like no one achieves that. We don't want it to be down at 5%, you know, kind of levels. But there's that for me is one measure. Like if you look at what we're proposing in the strategy about membership development and supporting members to be, you know, great engineers, that is the key thing that they want, which goes back to being a, you know, professionally registered engineer, right? You know, which is the main reason we exist as a PEI. But it's that impact piece about harnessing the power of our members to volunteer. You know, everyone joining this call, like, you know, like hearing this, whether you're live or whether you're looking at it afterwards, you're the cohort that, you know, is already drinking the Kool-Aid, as it were. Like, you know, you're the ones that are actually already participating, and yet we've got the, you know, the 115,000 members. Yeah, not everyone is going to want to volunteer, but there's loads of people out there, loads of members that would volunteer. A bit like we were just talking about on D&I. You know, you can't just let it happen. You have to be proactive in creating the opportunity for people. If you just look at what we're doing on the nominations committee, which is one of the other committees we refreshed after the governance review 4 years ago, you know, that committee now has open, transparent processes, open recruitment. We're bringing people into senior leadership roles within this institution we never would have done before. And that's only just got started. You know, if you look at like expanding the way that machine, if we go back to the analogy earlier, is working, you know, that will create opportunities for more people to get involved. And if we make it easier for people to volunteer in a hybrid working world, which is the other game changer here, because people can contribute in ways now that they wouldn't have necessarily been able to before, like that's really what drives like levels of engagement. And I think if we're smart going forwards, it'll be about when we do our KPIs and our performance metrics, it'll be about focusing on like what are the things that are really adding value in terms of engagement. And it's almost a holy grail, almost like of, like what are the things that, you're going to measure. All charities are trying to have great impact, right? But for us, we need to be smart about that, and we need to be clear that all of these things are engagement, not just one particular metric, I guess is my point.
Yes, no?
Do I have a follow-on? Of course I have. Of course I have follow-ons. Oh, now you've gone.
You've
thrown me a little bit.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes, I might warm up and come back in a moment.
Warm up and come back. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Meanwhile, there's some very nice comments being made in the chat towards you, Martin, and your reference to the importance of the strategy, really looking at that next generation. And I think that's very, very well said. I certainly, in my own household, you see it, right? Yes, I think the next generation really expect to see organisations be really clear on their values and their purpose. So I was really delighted that we gave such a focus on that in our own strategy work too. And I think, giving a talk on net zero tomorrow, and it's a bit dispiriting sometimes. You look at it and think, how on earth did we hand on this pickle to the next generation? So that we're going to need a lot of engineers in the future, certainly if we're going to achieve that net zero point.
I now have recalled.
Be my guest.
I just wanted to have people consider the sort of the growth path of organisations as they, from the point that they start off. If for any of you out there who are in young businesses or small businesses, my guess is it's probably very energetic, feels very agile. You've things changing all the time. You've got ideas bouncing around, and you're driving forward, and it feels absolutely great. For those of you in bigger organisations, what you'll probably benefit from is tremendous solidity of the fact that every large organisation knows how it's going. It's going to keep going. It'll be there tomorrow and next decade, and so on and so forth. Now, how organisations progress as they grow, they, for periods, will simply enlarge and do more of the same, but refine it. But there comes a point where you have pushed a particular model for an organisation as far as it will actually go, and you now need to do something completely different. And for any of you who've been in a business where you've gone from being a private company to a publicly owned company, that's often a major transformation in the way the business operates. We shouldn't forget that the dramatic increase over the last 100 years or so of the institution means that we may actually need a metamorphosis of a development, not simply a do this better, do that better, and what have you, but that we actually might need to look at ourselves and say we've got to do something completely different to face the future and take advantage of both the technology and the changes in the way people live, what people's expectations are, and to place ourselves into the future. Now, that's a really tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to do even if you're a very large organisation with lots deep pockets to take advisors on and work the problem before you make the decision. It's a really difficult one when you've got a relatively small employee base and so many volunteers giving tremendous time, but not dedicated to the task. So that's an exciting thing going forward. But again, going back to my role within council, I'm more keen to keep people thinking that there are limitless opportunities and options to consider. I would certainly expect my colleagues on the right to be taking a rather more pragmatic approach and saying, but you've got to live in today. And I think this is why an organisation like ours does need to have different perspectives. And again, the plug for council is why council is so important for the health of an organisation like, which is a membership organisation.
Yes,
I think-
and about having that spread of opinions and that spread of inputs as
Absolutely.
well, because we'll see maybe our roles within the institution is looking slightly different, and I think but we work together mutually to actually produce the end result, don't we? That's the main thing.
Yes.
I'm still reflecting on how you managed to get metamorphosis into that last intervention there. But I don't know if anyone else is trying to shake off the mental image of the institution changing from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Sorry, now everyone's thinking that.
Yeah, well, don't take it too far, because although I didn't do biology and stuff like that, I'm not sure that once they metamorphose into a moth or butterfly, they live very long.
Right,
So let's not take that too far.
Maybe we stop that.
We'll stop that one.
Let's go on to that more solid footing that you were talking about, because actually the strategy work does set a vision. It sets a single very powerful strapline, and I always enjoy hearing Giles unpack exactly what those words mean. So over to you, Giles.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. So we thought long and hard about this, and there's an element where you get to where you think too much about it. And at one stage, our sort of vision statement that we come up with was almost a paragraph long, and we said, well, hang on a minute, stop now. It has to be, memorable. It has to be understandable to people within our organisation, but outside of the organisation as well. So, the vision that we've set, and when we talk about vision, we're talking about the aspirational future state of the organisation, and that's not something we've really had up to this point. And really, you look at that vision statement that we published, and it talks about being global, being world leading, and being an engineering membership organisation, and that language is on purpose. So we say global because we want to be genuinely global. Now, there's been a lot of debate, at least I've seen it in the last 20 or so years I've been involved in this organisation, around are we a UK-based PEI with international members, or are we a genuinely international organisation? And having looked at the analysis and the feedback we've got, we are being very clear now that we want to be a genuinely international organisation. And then you ask the question, well, are we that today? Well, no, we're not. That's why it's a vision. That's the future aspirational states that we want to get to. And we want everyone, no matter where you are on the planet, to feel like you're part of the institution, and whatever country you live in or region of the world, that you get the same service and feel like you get the same service and opportunities, etc. Importantly, that you feel like you get that as if you were based in the UK. And we know from some of the feedback from our international colleagues that they don't feel like that. And some of you may be on the call, on this stream now, or listening to it afterwards. So that's the challenge we've set ourselves. We want to be world leading. We are very good at registering professional engineers, particularly against our other PEI partners. And we want to maintain that, but also improve on that. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get professionally registered, not by dropping the standards, I want to be clear on that, by just making the process of registration really super slick. And we know there's massive opportunity there, and so driving in those efficiencies so that we can get more people registered, so that more engineers can demonstrate that they are competent to the world, which is that focusing on that strategic goal number one. And then finally, when we talk about being an engineering membership organisation, we just try to think about what's the simplest way of describing us as an organisation. People talk about our professional engineering institutions, they talk about learning society. Those terms we understand those terms because we're in the institution, but the general public don't necessarily understand those terms in a way that is, you know, could be a soundbite on a news item or something like that. And so we just simply tried to put it in the plainest language we could. We are an engineering membership organisation, and you know, there's not much more to it than that. We just wanted it to be simple.
I'm all for that. I think plain language is vastly underrated. So I'm just scanning down the kind of areas that we wanted to cover, and I think we are nearly, but not yet, covering them all. So just an encouragement to people listening online, if you do have questions, please do post them in the chat pretty soon, if you can. But before we come back to perhaps some of those questions in the chat, turning to you, Phil, because Giles put that very well in thinking about the global perspective that we need to take. What's your view on those global challenges? What are the global challenges where you see the institution really being able to step up and play a major role?
Yeah, I think we have established, well, we just go into the four main areas that we're focusing on at the moment as an institution. And you can argue that we started off looking at those from a UK perspective, but I think you can expand it wider than that, because they deal with the global issues as well. So, you know, we talk about the sustainability, the net zero focus here in the UK clearly, but sort of sustainability and control of CO2 emissions is a global challenge, not just restricted to just this country. The global pandemic and the work that we've been doing there to address sort of infection control and disease control, again, another global area. The way that we actually roll out smarter solutions with regard to transport and also to building and infrastructure development. And those are challenges that exist all the way around the globe. Wherever there are people, then we will need to solve the problems in terms of how we house them and how we move them around. And you know, and education, I think, is the fourth area that we're focusing on. So I think that those four topics really are not UK limited. They are global areas that we need to think about solutions for. The individual solutions we come up with may look slightly differently. You know, maybe a slightly different grade of green in one area compared to another area, but nevertheless, the discussions that we're having within the institution, with how we actually approach those, I think will help us to roll out the message from a global perspective as well. And there, I think we're looking to the support of our local members and also the partner organisations that we're able to work with from a global perspective in terms of getting the message out. And I think sort of we've got a real opportunity now in the way the world works now is no longer just country focused. It's the global village. Everybody knows what's going on around the world in different areas, simply because communications is so open now. So I think that's a great motivator for us to actually understand that if we have a voice, we can get that voice out all the way around the globe to the global membership and to the global communities really, really easily nowadays. So let's make the benefit of actually being able to do that.
Super. Thank you, Phil. But before we finally wrap up, shall we put our panel on the spot? Everyone, if small round circles on a team screen could nod, they'd be nodding now, I'm sure. If you had to sum up, Martin, one word, what's the best thing about this strategy?
Simplicity. Explain why. Well, because actually having it simple and probably right, or as good as it could be, is more important than thinking that it has to be perfect and make it confusing because we put so many words in to ensure that we haven't been wrong, right? The simplicity is what allows people to get behind it and say, what does it mean to me? Because that's entirely what has to happen. Every part of the executive, all of the functional lines that we have to have to say, why are we doing events? Look back, that's what we're doing there. So why are we doing this? Right. Every region, what are we doing within our region? What are we doing to do that? What are we doing to do that? What do we need from the enablers? What are we as an enabler? And it's so simple that it's the power of that driving through, which opens up what can be done going forward by everybody out there.
Well, thank you for giving.
That was very kind, wasn't it?
That was very kind. Yeah, thanks for giving us the thinking time. My word would be direction. You know, I think it's so important that we have a direction of travel going forwards that we can align to, as Martin was just discussing. You know, we want to be able to build our activities around the strategy so that we are living and breathing it as an organisation. That is what you see successful organisations doing all over the globe. The ones that set the clear strategy and they direct their organisation along that strategy path, they are the most successful, and that's the way we want to be.
And Phil.
I was going to use aligned, but you slipped aligned into your response as well. It wasn't the word you chose, I think, but you slipped it into your response. But I do think our strategy does need to be heading in the direction that we wish it to head in, and also the alignment aspects of making sure that our business plan is building off the back of it. So that would be the word that I would select.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Graham, for your suggestion that we now mark ourselves out of 10. I think that would be a bit career limiting for me, so I'm going to skip that one. And instead gift you back a 9 or 10 minutes of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks for everybody.
Thank you.